Many or all the passages of the Bible are written in a particular context. And if you are not careful, if you are not a diligent Bible student, if you uproot a scripture out of context, then you can make it say whatever you want it to say. And you can make it mean whatever you want it to mean. So most of the time, you need to be able to establish a scripture in context. Then you can now begin to talk about it in application. If you are going to apply a scripture to your life, to your spiritual journey, you first of all need to understand the context in which it was written. Sometimes to understand context of a verse or of a chapter, you might need to go back to pre-text. That means if I'm reading a portion of scripture and my portion of interest is verse 5, I might need to go back to verse 1 to understand the context of verse 5. Because that the Bible was not written in chapters and verses. The Bible is a prose. So sometimes when you are in chapter 3, you need to go as far back as chapter 1 to understand what is happening in chapter 3. For instance, that popular teaching that is called the Sermon on the Mount is 3 chapters of Matthew. It begins in chapter 5 and ends at the end of chapter 7. So there is 5, there is 6, and there is 7. So if you jump into chapter 7 and want to establish something in chapter 7, there's a possibility that you'll be erroneous, or there's a possibility that you'll be ambiguous. There's a possibility that you will be wanting to read your own meaning into the text and distort the spirit of what it is that Jesus was trying to communicate if you don't go back to Matthew chapter 5 and verse 1. That entire teaching in 5, 6, and 7 was about kingdom citizens. How those who have come into the kingdom ought to comport themselves in this life. So if you don't understand the root, it's possible for you to misinterpret the stem. So in Bible study, there is root, there is stem, there is branch. There is root, there is stem, there is branch. If you start beginning to establish doctrine from a branch, you will raise people who say things like, man is a spirit. So if a man goes to fornicate, it's his body that is fornicating, is not his spirit. Because the person does not know root, the person does not know stem, the person is Babasue, has never been schooled in how to approach the beautiful text that is called scripture.